to one another. I don't believe that serves the interests of Pakistan, and I don't believe that serves the interests of the people of America. There's definitely a newfound opportunity to enhance engagement, to move beyond a transactional relationship to a more deep and meaningful relationship. And I certainly see the space for that. I certainly see the window for that. And if only we continue to have an honest and meaningful dialogue with one another, Pakistan is very committed to working with the international community. We want to, we are a modern Muslim nation that will be taken seriously on the world stage. We will conduct ourselves in a responsible manner and in an honest manner, engage with everyone, be friends to all and enemies to none, and hope to work towards the mutual benefit of our two countries.
Thank you, Minister. Betül Yürük, Turkish News Agency. We heard some of the ministers at the General Assembly today at the International Migration Review Forum raising concerns about the rise of threat in Afghanistan and as a result a new wave of migration. As a neighboring country to Afghanistan, how concerning is this for Pakistan? And also, how should the international community engage with the Taliban regime? Thanks.
Thank you so much for your question. And the issue of refugees and migration is a sort of a hot button topic in countries across the world. Particularly given the events in Afghanistan, it is most certainly a fear for us and all neighboring countries. We do fear the possibility of the floodgates opening to massive a refugee crisis like we've seen in the past. As the humanitarian situation in Afghanistan worsens, as the economic situation in Afghanistan worsens, the threat and likelihood of this happening increases. That is why Pakistan is very keen that we don't send a message to the people of Afghanistan yet again that after decades of conflict that they are abandoned by the international community. Pakistan is working particularly hard to assist in the humanitarian crisis and encourage the international community to engage with Afghanistan and engage with the humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan, to stop a total collapse of the Afghan economy, because surely if 95% of the people of Afghanistan are under threat of poverty, of going below the poverty line, that not only has consequences for Afghanistan, but it has consequences for Pakistan and indeed the rest of the world, one of those manifestations would be in the form of refugees and migrants.
Can I have a follow-up, please, on
Yes,
Afghanistan? Taliban has rolled back all the sanctions that have been imposed on women in terms of dressing, education, suspending of education. What does your government convey to the Taliban, your position on that?
So the Pakistani government is very clear in private and in public that we convey to the new regime in Afghanistan that they live up to their international commitments. Now, whether that is their international commitment to the right to girls' education and allowing the women's rights in Afghanistan within that context, or it's their international commitment to not allow their soil to be used for terrorist activity, or it's their international commitment to form a more inclusive government setup. In our private conversations and in our public conversations, we do insist on these points. As far as the specific question of women's rights are concerned, the previous government may have had its own approach, but as Foreign Minister of Pakistan, I believe when I emphasize the importance of women empowerment, the importance of women's rights, that is not within some sort of Western imposed construct. We believe that women were given rights by Islam. We believe that the right to education for women is granted because of Islam. The first word in the Quran is Iqra, which means read. It does not say only men read, We are all to read. So Pakistan has had the first female prime minister in the Muslim world. She was elected the first time. She was elected a second time. And had she not been assassinated, she would have been elected the third time. So when we speak to the people of Afghanistan, or when we speak to the new regime in Afghanistan about women's rights and their obligation to live by their promises to the international community, and we do so not only in light of that, but also because we too believe these are rights of the women and girls in Pakistan and in Afghanistan.
Okay, my question is about that. History tells us that we have been ally of the United States against Russia in Afghanistan. Now, how this new government is trying to overcome that, and secondly, because of the trip to Moscow by the former Prime Minister, there is a wave of disappointment among Europe and America for not, making any condemnation of the Russian invasion. So where does your government stand, and how you are going to make a rapprochement towards that policy?
As far as what you're referring to at the start about being allies in Afghanistan, that is also now very old history. That is the history of the 80s, and obviously the Cold War context and what went on there is now part of history. As far as the former Prime Minister's trip to Russia, I would absolutely defend the former Prime Minister of Pakistan. Pakistan's Prime Minister conducted that trip as part of his foreign policy, and without knowing that no one is psychic. No one has a sixth sense. There's no way we could have possibly known that would have been the time to start, that the current conflict would start. And I believe it is very unfair to punish Pakistan for such an innocent action. Of course, Pakistan is absolutely clear as far as it comes to the principles of the United Nations, as far as it comes to the principles of non-use of force, and all of the principles of the United Nations, and we stand by the principles of the United Nations. We are not part of any conflict. We do not wish to be part of any conflict. In fact, we will continue to emphasize on the importance of peace. We will continue to emphasize on the importance of dialogue and diplomacy to resolve this conflict as soon as possible. And we will certainly not take any sides or take the sides of any aggressor within this context. But Pakistan has its own problems. Pakistan has witnessed decades of conflict in Afghanistan, and as I mentioned in my speech, हम थक गए हैं जंग देख के. हमारे बच्चे भी शहीद हुए हैं, हमारे क़यादत शहीद हुए हैं, औरतें मर्द शहीद हो चुके हैं, और हम समझते हैं कि अगर डायलॉग और डिप्लोमेसी के टूल्स इस्तेमाल किए जाते हैं तो हम काफ़ी ऐसे जैसे मसले हैं इनका हल निकाल सकते हैं.
Sir, my follow-up question is, Pakistanis live in America and Europe.
Can you...
Sorry?
This press comments, we really appreciate you here. Frankie Ciardo from TRT World. Two follow-up questions. One, how would you characterize your relationship with Russia? And number two is, how would you characterize your relationship with Russia and Vladimir Putin? And number two, when the U.S. withdrew from Afghanistan, do you feel that they left a vacuum for terrorism which would endanger your country?
Thank you for your question. Pakistan has a government, has relationships with all states, all governments in the world, and whoever happens to head those governments or head those states, we also have official and diplomatic relations with them. There are no personal relationships between individuals, and they're only a relationship between states and governments as far as your Russian question is concerned. As far as Afghanistan, we are concerned that if the humanitarian crisis remains unaddressed, if Afghanistan, 90% of the population of Afghanistan is allowed to slip under the poverty line, if the Afghan economy is allowed to collapse, then things will go from bad to worse. there are concerns about terrorism. The concerns about terrorism are the concerns of all countries in the region and international forces. We are all concerned as to whether the new regime in Afghanistan has the capacity or the will to deal with such terrorist groups. And as we are looking to them to live up to their international obligations, one such obligation was to ensure that no terrorist activity would take place, or their soil would not be used for terrorist activity. So we're hoping that on the one side, the new regime in place over there would do whatever they can to discourage such elements, and on the other side, we're working with the international community to help alleviate the humanitarian crisis developing there, the economic crisis developing there, because we believe that allowing the Afghan people to feel that they've been abandoned once again, allowing them to plummet to the depths of poverty and having an economic catastrophe has no plus sides and only negative sides for everybody involved.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Foreign Minister. My name is Abdul Hamid Sayam from the Arabic daily Al-Quds Al-Arabi. I see so much similarities between the behavior of India in Kashmir and the behavior of Israel in occupied Palestine. The Israelis moved their nationals into the occupied West Bank, and the Indians doing the same. The Indians scrapped the special status of Kashmir, as you know, and Israel considered the West Bank as part of Greater Israel. The same thing applies to the relationship between Prime Minister Modi and the former Prime Minister Netanyahu and the current one. So the government of Mr. Imran Khan was committed to see the struggle in both and support them. How do you characterize the policy of your government regarding both the struggle of Kashmiri people and Palestinians? Thank you
There's
very much.
been consensus across the political spectrum in Pakistan, whether it comes to the question of Kashmir or it comes to the question of Palestine. We are unanimous in our support for the people of Kashmir, and we are unanimous in our support to the people of Palestine. The parallels that you see are seen by a lot of people that observe the situation in both. We just spoke at the United Nations Security Council, where we observed that occupied territories such as Palestine and Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir face the misery of perpetual conflict, never-ending perpetual conflict that result in many miseries, including hunger. We believe that we must continue to highlight the plight of the people of Kashmir and the people of Palestine. We are still, very recently, the murder, the assassination, whatever word you like to use, of wearing press identification material and still being shot in the neck, and then the fact that her funeral was also attacked really shook the international community in a way that that many images and events have been unable to shake in modern times, and the plight of the people of Kashmir more often than not goes unnoticed, which is why there's an extra burden on the Muslim community to speak out for our brothers and sisters who cannot do so effectively for themselves for one reason or the other.
Thank you, sir. Following up questions on Afghanistan and your comments about the Taliban's pledge to the international community not to allow the territory to be used for terrorism. The Taliban recently claimed that they have brokered an accord between Pakistan military and the TTP, Tehreek-e-Taliban in Pakistan, Could you please elaborate or explain what happened, sir?
इफ्तिखार साहब, आप जहाँ तक TTP के issue है, as far as the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan is concerned, they have a very troubling history of the way that they've conducted themselves within Pakistan. Their terrorist activity has been the most the significant challenge within the terrorism within terrorism in Pakistan. Pakistan ke the biggest terrorist attacks in Pakistan, the most devastating terrorist attacks in Pakistan are linked to Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan. Whether it is the APS attack in Peshawar on the school children who were murdered in cold blood, whether it's the attack on my mother, Shaheed Mohtharma Benazir Bhutto, and a whole host of terrorist activity in Pakistan are linked to these groups. Pakistan has, at different times, tried to various approaches to deal with terrorism. We go after those who commit terrorism. We pursue those who are involved in terrorism. And we've also had a policy of engagement, and we've seen in the past that the policy of engagement is that, to put it generously, has had limited results. At the moment, there are reports of, as you mentioned, as you stated in your question, and I can't add much more detail to that, other than to say that I'm monitoring the situation, and I hope that, unlike the past, if there are any dialogues going on right now, that unlike the past they bear fruit. But it's important to emphasize that we must insist on the new regime in Afghanistan that not only their own soil not be used for terrorist activities, but groups like the TTP that are linked to the TTA and other such terrorist groups are also discouraged by the new regime in Afghanistan from conducting terrorist activity anywhere else.
Yeah. You can have a floor. Yeah. You can ask the question. Yeah.
I see, I didn't realize.
Natiq Naidoğlu, Azerbaijan, Real TV. Thank you, Foreign Minister. My question is, how will the change of government in Pakistan affect Azerbaijan and Pakistan relations? By the way, is an official visit to Azerbaijan on the agenda?
So Pakistan, the people of Pakistan, the people of Azerbaijan enjoy great relations, and I, for one, would be very keen to enhance the relationship between our two countries. I don't think you should expect a change in any way, shape or form as far as our foreign policy is concerned with Azerbaijan with the change of government. Right, bro, how are you doing?
Sorry I missed most of this, but I hope to make up for this with three quick questions. One,
Go ahead.
So what do you think of the reputed nemesis of Pakistani democracy, and especially your party, the PPP? I'm talking about the Pakistani army. What's your new considered opinion on the military establishment, considering your current posting? Number two, what is your opinion about how long your government is going to stay in power, considering the speculation that is ongoing on the ground these days about the longevity of your government? And thirdly, sir, finally, how does it feel to be here in New York, in the same place where your famous grandfather was, and especially made that famous speech here in '71? How does it feel to be back in business?
Thank you, Vijay. New York now?
Yes, sir.
अच्छा, इन सबको बिठा के आप खुद पहुंच गए थे. As far as your question is concerned, nemesis is not a word I would use. The Pakistani army is not the army of any one political party or any one Pakistani. It is a national institution. It belongs to each and every one of us. It has always and consistently been the view of the Pakistan People's Party. It is in our manifesto that all such institutions should play their constitutional role, their legal role allowed in accordance with the law. It is why we have consistently advocated for them to be apolitical. And the success of the no confidence motion in Pakistan, the first time a democratic constitutional procedure has been used to oust a prime minister, unlike in the past where only unconstitutional and undemocratic moves have been deployed, is a success, is an achievement of Pakistani democracy. It is an achievement of the Pakistani constitution, and it goes a long way to speak about the progress that has been made by Pakistani institutions. Obviously, nothing happens in a vacuum, and this one event or this one achievement does not wash away the effects of undemocratic steps that have happened in our history. We believe